That's where I ended up in high school, and then from there I went to College of the Desert. I don't know if I knew you there.
I think in passing.
In passing. Then I went to a school called Cal Arts in Valencia, where I bumped into him. And he is from the desert as well.
Yep.
After Cal Arts, I worked in Los Angeles for years with a gentleman named Michael Pressman. Shows like Picket Fences, Chicago Hope, Ninja Turtles 2, quite a bit of movies. And then I wrote screenplays and did my own thing. And then it wasn't until about kind of during the Rodney King riot, I got tired of Los Angeles. I just got tired of the whole rat race, the way you see Hollywood now with the hashtag and this and that. I kind of saw that, got burnt out, and I said, I want to go back to the desert. I loved going to school, College of the Desert. So I packed my bags and moved to Palm Springs. No job, and I've been here since, God, almost like 20 plus years. Working for an NBC affiliate, and then the ABC affiliate, and then I broke out on my own with a business partner named Pam. We formed a production company. We shot feature films out here with Frank Gorshin, a lot of things years ago. And then our distributors would somehow go to markets, and we would never get the money back from the films and our investors. So we decided to go to the market. So every year we went to Cannes, we went to MIFED in Milan, we went to I think it's AFM market in Santa Monica, and then we would start to rep and pick up other filmmakers' movies that were having the same problem. You know, they couldn't get distribution. So we said, you know what, we will cover, we're gonna fly there anyway and rep our films. So if you can even make your own damn poster, we'll put our sticker on it and what have you and sell it, and we're cheaper than your average bear. So we did that, and then things changed also with markets, 9/11, and video. Internet came about, and the internet allowed you to start putting trailers and things through the internet, where you can actually, instead of getting a VHS cassette tape and posters and getting all your movies and going to a market and setting up posters and just sitting there and waiting, you can now send video just right from your house, trailers, and click on it and exchange money that way. So a lot has changed. I've seen a lot changed. And from that, I kind of focused more towards documentaries and nonprofit work. And that's what I do now. But I have a lot of other skeletons in my closet, which I'll share with you guys. That's about me in a nutshell. So I've actually made my whole living in film.
Wow. He knows how to juggle. We're still learning to juggle. I'm Glen Wuthrich, and I'm a native of the desert. I grew up here in Palm Desert, up in Silver Spur Ranch. And when I went to Indio High School, there were only 3 high schools. I like to tell my nieces and nephews, I went to school back in the 1900s, you know, way back when. But when I was in the theater program, that was the program in high school that was like a college level theater program run by Rod Bayshore. Palm Desert High School, one of his star students that I went to school with is now the head of the theater department in Palm Desert High School. And I mention all of this is because he was the only teacher I knew who didn't talk down to us. He talked to us as peers. I mean, he was still an authority, but he expected a lot of you. So he kind of came off hard, kind of really stern at times, but you got so much more out of it because you weren't patronized, you weren't pandered to. And it made an impression on me. When I left high school, I was thinking, well, I've always cartooned. My father was a chef at El Dorado Country Club. When they were building Eisenhower Medical Center, and they're raising all those millions of dollars, somebody has to design the menus, has to cook the food, prepare all these banquets to raise a lot of cash, and that was my father. And he's a immigrant. I'm first generation American. And anyway, when he would come home, he would have these stacks of menus from El Dorado Country Club, and they're on watercolor paper. So the backside was blank, and so that was my canvas. So I started out on watercolor paper, whether it was just my cartoons and making jokes about the neighbors, or neighbors' dogs, or whatever the content was, whatever the news was of the day, I was printing it out and cartooning it. So anyway, I had these 2 disciplines, right? Cartooning, but I also love the theater and storytelling and presentation, dramatics. So I was thinking, well, there's somebody I knew was going to Cal Arts, and that's where James and I met. But before then, to save money, I went to College of the Desert, and I was very lucky that I went because there was a fantastic arts program, sculpture program, and everyone says, oh, don't go to College of the Desert, go to university. Aside from the money concerns, I'm glad I did, because coming out of high school and going into a place like Cal Arts, that would have been like a hallucinatory experience for me. It would have been too much when looking back. So sometimes you think you have the direct line, the direct goal, you're absolutely fixated on going to where you eventually go to, but you don't realize that a detour actually prepares you better for your destination. So I was very fortunate that way. So anyway, I was at Cal Arts. It's essentially the character animation program. You were in the film program.
Yeah, live action.
You were in live action. And so the character animation program is, because the institute was set up by Walt Disney, the whole idea of Cal Arts was to have interdisciplinary cross-pollination of the arts. Whether it was dance studios, fine art, film,
Set builders,
set builders, all that, the technical aspect, everybody was there under one roof. So it's a great environment. If you would just kind of lift your head away from your desk and look around, it's amazing the people you meet, because you just don't know who you're going to be influenced by. A lot of it's, you go to a lot of parties when you're in college, right? But I went there. It's a 4-year program. I went in 3 because my studies, my required studies, I got out of the way at COD. So it saved me a lot of money. But it was essentially kind of looked down upon. I got a lot of comments that it was like a feeder program for the Disney Studio farm system. So we were kind of looked down upon in the art school as a trade school. But, we were able to be gainfully employed. When I left Cal Arts, and I graduated, it was the year of the animation union strike. There was no work to be found. Not even as an assistant or as a gopher. There was just whoever they held on to, they weren't hiring anybody.
And were jobs going overseas too?
Yeah, actually it was. There was well, like the Simpsons, which I later became a part of, they've had most of their animation in Korea for the duration of the series, and that's kind of the standard. Disney's moved a lot of stuff to India. But yeah, it was kind of a downtime. So I went up to a Cal Arts friend, my roommate, Joe Kubinick. We went up to San Francisco, and I did improv theater, which I really dug, and it brought back a lot of memories of my own theater training in Indio High School. So I was there for about a year, but then a friend called me one night and said, there's this new show. If you come down here and do a test, I'll help you. And everyone you went to school with is like working here. I'm really getting paid to like go back to college. This is great. So, and that show was The Simpsons. So, the thing that I reflect on is that sometimes you can be the beneficiary of good timing. It was just at that time when animation was starting to explode. And this one show, who would have guessed it wouldn't have gone on that long? But you do enough times doing a test, and you don't know anything. But sure enough, I walked in on a Friday afternoon around 6 o'clock at night, and the door swings open, and it's Jim Reardon, the guy I went to school with. And he's one of the writers on like Wreck-It Ralph and Zootopia and WALL-E, and he has a long list. Great guy. He just looked at me and goes, "Where have you been? You like disappeared for 2 years." I said, "Well, I've been working on this test for 2 years." And so he took a look at my test, and he said, "Hey, I'll show you, maybe you recognize some of the people around here." And then Rich Moore, who's director of Wreck-It Ralph now, he looked around the corner and he just looked at me and said, well, looks like they threw the net out far enough. And I pulled you in. So he took a look at my test, and he says, "You know what? We're just so busy. Just show up on Monday. Let's just get going. We're behind schedule. Let's just go." And you learn, you have to just think, and you probably have tons of experience like this. You have to just think on your feet, and it all comes back to you. But it's a little daunting if you overthink something at the get-go, and you probably all had this experience with writing. Sometimes you just have to get into the physical motion of whatever that process is, whether it's writing, whether it's painting. It does come back to you. It's all random access memory. It's in your brain. You just have to like trigger it, you know. But I have a very atypical career in animation and television because I was there for 20 years. Someone asked me, they said, how long were you there? And I said, I was in for 15 to 20. No, like, sounds like a prison sentence. But it's like I didn't know any better. I had a few stints like a Cartoon Network on the side, you know, off and on. But the Simpsons was the main mafia of which I was a part of, the Springfield Mafia. But, so, yeah, and I know people who've like with James, have juggled and worked with a lot of different aspects of the industry. My most experience with writing is writing couch gags on The Simpsons because they don't have time to write some of the gags. Now they do because they bring in celebrity directors, but they would ask us for ideas. So if the family's running into the TV room and a New York subway pulls in, they'll get on the subway and it leaves the living room. That's something I wrote, you know, that type of thing. You have to do it on the fly. So again, your improvisation comes back to writing. I like to write by improvising. That's my approach.
And did you turn everything on the back of a menu?
Well, you know, sometimes you can afford to have the things on the other side of that menu.
Yeah.
But
my experience with writing is I procrastinate. After I have a cup of tea,
and
then I'll sit down and write. Or I'm gonna rent a cabin in the woods one day, and then I'm gonna go there, and then after I chop the wood, and then after I never get. I'm the worst. It's a lonely thing.
Does the procrastination become the story?
Yes, it just practically does. Writing screenplays, so it is, and you guys writing books and screenplays. And now age factor, as I get older, you know. You always hear people go, oh, they just want young people, Hollywood and ideas, and that's not true, or stories from men, or stories from, and I always look back, I think her name is Fannie Mae? She was a comedian, redhead gal.
Fannie Flagg.
Fannie Flagg, was it Flagg? She
Yeah,
wrote Fried Green Tomatoes?
Right.
Great, that's, you know, the empowerment of someone that's older, that wrote something, that went to Hollywood, had it made. So there's no right way to get something shown. There's no wrong way. There's no formula. I'm sitting here today going, I don't know. I've seen it work for other people. I had a roommate in school who devoted his life to a script. Never dated, never got married, never had family, never had this, never had a job, never had his mom and dad would help him out. He just worked on this one story over and over. Ivan was in his story. He wanted someone to do acting so he could like rotoscope and animate all this.
Oh, yeah.
So years went by. I would say 15 years from school. He worked on this thing. And finally, we were worried about him. We're like, God, what is he gonna do with it? So he met a guy named Avnet, who produced and directed a lot of huge films, and said, well, how much do you think you can make this for? And he's like, $2 million. Like, $2 million? Yeah, I think I can do it for $2 million. So I think they signed a deal at $2 million to make it. And then he got the script and all that, and said, you know, Carrie, you need to direct this thing. And the film, by the way, is Sky Captain. Had Jude Law, Gwyneth Paltrow, Angelina Jolie. So that's what he was waiting for, and he got to direct this picture. Didn't do anything afterwards. That was it.
But it's a very significant film technically because it's one of the films that used almost exclusively green screen, which the producers are like, this is a lot more cost effective to be able to computer generate scenery and just have them in front of a green screen.
And I think everyone looked at him and
they used it as a template.
All that, and then left him in the dirt and took off. But you'd climb up a pair of green stairs and sit in a green chair. And next thing you know, they put an airplane, an old bomber airplane.
Yeah.
Just amazing. He shot it in England, Eric Atkins was the DP. He lit some of my films. But
And that opening sequence where there's an airship flying over Manhattan in a snowstorm and docking at the mooring post, which is the top of the Empire State Building, that's why it was built. And having that whole sequence was what he used to pitch to financiers, was to get them to excited, because it had so much atmosphere, so much layering, the searchlights, and it was a spectacular opening. But back winding to college, there was a one course at Cal Arts on film producing by Mitchell Block and Ben Shedd. I think Mitchell Block is the dean at USC Film School, but it was a very onerous, very demanding class. And needless to say, and these are the guys who I was saying, who's taking your class before? And they go, well, there's this kid you're going to hear about. His name is Ken, and he does documentaries, and he has this great documentary about the Civil War. And he took our class on how to get to all the funding from public television. And it's Ken Burns, the Civil War, but they took his class. And the reason I bring up all of this is there were a lot of students, myself included, in this class, and we have our own student projects and deadlines we have to meet. And every week, one by one or by a few people would peel off, and they can't take the class, they can't take the class. There was one guy in the class who finished it. Well, Ken Burns was before us, but there's another guy with a name that starts with K. His name was Cary Conran, and he's the guy who produced Sky Captain and The World of Tomorrow. There's one thing about Cary Conran, very unassuming guy, really sweet, very unassuming, but really dogged and really determined and quietly very driven. And you wouldn't notice him in a room. You wouldn't even pick up on him. You might not even remember him, but he'll be there all the way to the end. And in that class was no exception. And they had us, with all this supplemental material on producing. It was actually, you know what? I should actually bring in those materials. I still have those materials from that class. The class I never finished.
Cal Arts was an unstructured school for live action. It wasn't USC, it wasn't UCLA. It was art school. So there was no balance to make commercial type films. So they brought Block and Shed in,
Mm-hmm.
And like our math courses in school were how much film, how much is lab costs, how much or catering, how much. So your math basically was budgeting a film. Your English class was putting your script together. I mean, it was just that was the school. There were really no grades. You were just judged at the end of the year on your project, and then asked back or cut from school. It was tough that way. But it wasn't really geared like a USC or a UCLA. It was very, people just made strange stuff. And I remember going to school, you had to make a 1-minute film. You had to be introduced to, everyone worked as a crew. It's a great exercise, but it was, let's say, 20 people. They broke them up in groups. So that week, you were the DP for this person who wrote a script and they were going to direct it. And someone else did the lighting and that. And then the following week, you were the director with your script and someone else is shooting your project and this. And they just kind of did it that way. And then you got to sit and edit your movie, and great experience, just a 1-minute clip. And you get to then project it and have a party afterwards. But it kind of made you well-rounded. Like, do I like audio? I know I went to school to be a director, but maybe I really do love doing, producing instead.
You saw that with a lot of your classmates.
Absolutely. Todd had a great sound guy and all that. But I remember going to the library, the teacher goes, go look at some of the past student films. And I said, okay. He goes, look at Tim Burton's movie, because he went to Cal Arts. So I look at Tim Burton's film, and there's Paul Rubens is in it. He's the actor who's Pee-wee. And the guy that did the music was Danny Elfman from Oingo Boingo. They were all Cal Arts students, same time. They all shared, and then they went off and did Pee-wee's Big Adventure and Beatles, all those movies together. So all those films are available. If you ever go to Cal Arts, you can actually check into the library and see these past films. Jimmy Smits, David Hasselhoff, they're all in these movies, these first, because the students would run to the theater school and get actors, or they'll run to the
Right.
dance school to get dance or costumes.
It's like
you know.
being in a big studio.
Yeah, you just kind of run around and get students and see if you can work it out. So, but doing those 1-minute projects kind of put you through the course of, do I like writing? Or by the end of it, you know, I think everyone would vote in saying, if the film really sucked, there was no good script, period. That was it. It all came down to that. So I think writing was exciting for me, and that's what I kind of stayed on top of, was just writing and making sure that if I produce something or do it, there's a story to it, or there's a beginning,
It's everything.
a little bit of an end, or something like that, or a hook to the beginning.
I was at the animation festival, Palm Springs Animation Festival, and I was with some industry people who were kind of poo-pooing the films, and they were looking at the material with too many filters, which is dangerous. Even as a storyboard artist, you see all kinds of errors. Even I'm watching old movies with one of my supervising directors on the TV show on The Simpsons, and I go, look at all the rules they're breaking. And he reminded me, he said, whoa, 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 whoa. You're working in animation. Animation is two-dimensional. It's abstract to the viewer. You have to follow these rules of continuity, of not crossing the line, the camera, because it really pops. And don't do too much deep focus cutting, because as a viewer, you're going to be watching like a tennis match, and when you're sitting at mid-court and you're going like this, you're exhausted because it's animation. But live action, it's more familiar with what we see every day, so you can get away with it, But there are a lot of considerations you have to take in when you're doing pre-production about writing.
And we had one teacher was great, Sandy McKendrick, Alexander McKendrick.
Alexander McKendrick.
Great director, made some wonderful,
Director of
wonderful
Sweet Smell of Success,
Success.
Lavender Hill Mob.
Lady Killers.
Lady Killers, Alec Guinness and Tony
yeah.
Curtis, and
Great,
really good,
great
solid
director.
films.
Because I was very lucky that he was a teacher there, and I was in his course. And the things that stood out for me was, he always said, when you write or you do a story, bottom line, the back of your head, always say this: you want interesting people doing interesting things. Other than that, it's going to be, you want interesting people doing interesting things. It could be a person walking down a street and they're going in somewhere, and it just kind of leads you into that. And the other thing he told me was,
My boy, what are you doing behind the camera? You
Go
should
get
be in
Glen.
front of the camera.
yes, he told me, if you don't feel you have a good ending, you probably don't have the right beginning. I'm like, oh God, that means I got to redo everything and shuffle around. My ending's not quite there. I didn't nail that landing, whatever it was. But he goes, unfortunately, your beginning. Look at the beginning of your script. And it's like, oh shit, that's called rework. I got to have a cup of tea and run a house in the cabin.
In animation, we edit before we animate because it's so labor intensive. So you have to do all this pre-planning. It's critical. Getting back to when I was at that film festival, I think what I forgot to mention was, if you've got a wall and a lamp and a hand, and you're doing a shadow show, I'm there. If you got a good story, I'll go along. If it's the production values are low, what is the essence of why should I give a damn to even watch this? I want to be entertained. I'm rooting for filmmakers. I don't go in there kind of going, that's not what we did. Yeah, they're trying. Oh, we've already done that. I just want to be in the moment, because that's what it is, right? You're going to see an exhibition of a film, and you want to be in the moment. You want to be transported. Whatever your problems are, for a little bit, you just forget about them and be transported. And it is time travel. It's really, really potent art form. And if you have the right attitude to just go along, I want to dive in, I want to go with you. Take me to your land, take me to your leader. But in storyboarding, which is essentially editing, pre-production, as opposed to live action, sometimes you have a few moments in a half-hour script that you really want to emphasize because they have a lot of impact in the script. And so you have these scenes figured out, and then you reverse engineer. You go backwards. So sometimes you do have your ending or your middle, your main points of dramatic moments that you already have set, and then you have to shoehorn and work it's not all linear, it's not all left to right. You know, you can work you probably already, I mean,
Look at Hitchcock.
you already know that, you know, right?
It's all broken up.
Yeah, totally. But going back and forth. So, yeah.
Who all here is writing a book? And then who's writing screenplays? Screenplay books. Yeah.
Who's writing jokes? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
I am a joke.
I'm writing a lot of monologues. You have a joke?
No, I said I am a joke.
You're a method jokester. Be the part.
Well, and I know the industry has changed because I've seen, when I started out, I was shoot films, 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter, then it just changed. And like I said, in the markets, it would always be you'd set up a booth and do that. And now when I'm video shooting something or with a client, the camera is real tiny. You can shoot a movie on a phone now and it looks better than the stuff I shot. And then sending it, you would send it out on a 3/4 inch tape, then a beta tape, and then a VHS tape, then a DVD, and now it's a thumb drive, and now it's so everything's changing. And then now storylines and the way we view things. I mean, I look at a video now and it's like you can skip the commercial in 5 seconds. My finger is right there. Jeez, you know, and I can go right to that clip and watch it. So it's just, everything's kind of short and attention span.
Yeah.
And my mom was really good friends, and I'll jump back to someone, I think he had it right. He had grant writers, and as corny as he was, my mom was really good friends with Huell-Hauser. And Huell-Hauser, when he started out, when he left the news anchoring and doing that kind of stuff, he found a grant writer, he figured out his niche. He did a thing called, video log. And they were little 10-minute mini documentaries. A guy that owns a mule ranch, or the lady with a bunch of newspaper rubber bands and now she can't get out of her apartment with it. It's so big, you know, whatever. He'd find these little stories. They're interesting people doing interesting things.
Yeah.
And he did this little, and then he had just great, he was a grant writer, a great grant writer. And then he would do California Gold and take road trips and,
Visiting.
you know, he had a great niche. But you can now take his content today and play it because you can break it up. And that's how Netflix is going, and that's how a
Little
lot
mini
of
episodes, little
yeah.
vignettes.
Like there's no television really in my house. My 3 boys, they don't watch TV the way we watch TV or listen to radio. They don't. It's all, if my cable went out, it wouldn't be a big deal. They don't watch television. They get all their information, and they're current, but it's all from their phone. It's all digital, and they have a whole other set of movie stars that they think about. It's, you know, it's a whole other world out there. So,
And you watch a lot, if you're watching TV, you're probably watching with a handheld device sometimes. So I'm watching Turner Classic and go, wow, who's that? And I'll look up IMDb, Internet Movie Database, and wow, she was in all these, I've never,
oh, still
never
alive.
seen her yet.
Still alive.
Yeah.
Wow, interesting, right?
Still alive.
Yeah, but it's changed. So content, when you write content, you know, I think short format seem like it's the way to go. Broken up in long things. So I think a great example is, I know it's long format, but a short format, it's a series. But if anyone has not seen Breaking Bad, it's just talk about your heart and your throat and the way that it was just an amazing piece of work. But there are series like that also on Netflix. They're just very short, and when you put them all together and binge watch, you can watch the whole thing and you see how it's laid out. But like I said, it all goes back to just interesting characters doing interesting things, and that always just stuck in my head. So I think it applies to books, short, long documentaries.
Yeah.
You know.
Even animation's going back to the old Chuck Jones 7-minute animation short. So you'd see in theaters as an animation short with the newsreel and all that. And Cartoon Network has gone from 22-minute programs now down to 13-minute programs, and now they're doing half of that 6-minute, like a collection of segments. It's all being compressed, and it's all for, this is the platform. Everything seems to be going in that direction. At least in television, especially. Television is trying to have Well, what do you watch? You watch Apple TV or Hulu or
I don't have
Amazon
cable.
Prime?
I don't
None
have
of that
TV.
at all. So it's all handheld?
Yeah, little bits of it. I get
Yeah.
to watch. I don't know how I gather my information. I'm trying to think here. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm current.
Just
with-
word of mouth. You're going back to the old try.
Yeah, want to try me out? Oh no, the old classics.
Mr. Keen's?
I'm not yet, and I'm just not crazy about television today. I'm not really crazy about Hollywood today, and that's why I kind of years ago I just kind of backed out. And I love it here in the desert, and I like what I'm doing, but I don't. You know, I'm excited right now. I'm working on a project on the Second War with a person that I met out here, and I'm racking my brain. I know how to tell the story and write it, but is that going to be current to the audience now? And I kind of want to write the story for more of a younger generation, like my kid. If I wrote it in like a normal way, like a movie, I don't think they would see it. But if I can kind of tell a story in little clumps, then I think that a 13-year-old kid now would probably get it and get a piece of it, rather than sitting through a whole boring army movie on the war.
But he
you
was
know?
he was a magician.
Yeah, totally different side of the war. But I'm kind of looking at things now of how to tell the story, how can it relate in the future. And I think there's obviously Hollywood's still there, they're making movies, I understand, but I think for little people to slip in there and do things, I think it's short content.
Yeah. As writers, do you know anything about or familiar with Story Spine? Have you heard of that? Story Spine? It's a real fundamental in improv theater about how to, because the number one rule in improvisation is there's a premise that's given to the group and you accept the premise and you just go. You don't even think. Please don't think if you're doing improv, because then you're filtering and then you're trying to think of jokes and one-liners and there's no rhythm. It's like somebody's playing the drum at a totally different beat than the rest of the musicians on stage. And so Story Spine is, Pixar has used it for years. I learned it back in school, and it's essentially 8 points, and you can look this up. It's pretty well known. It's number one, once upon a time, ... every day, ... until one day, ... and because of that, ... and because of that, ... and because of that, ... until finally, ... and ever since then, ... They're trying to break down just I think I was mentioning earlier to Mike about the elevator pitch, the 30-second pitch. When I was talking to young filmmakers here in Palm Springs 2 months ago in the Animation Festival, everyone would ask them the same question: what are you doing next? And some of the kids are just, they're innocents and they're being honest and saying, I don't know, I've think of a few things. And I just said, hey, if anyone ever asks you that, just make it up. It doesn't even have to be good, just tell them something, because when people, especially people in any kind of connection with financing, they don't want a one-trick pony. They want to see what's your sophomore project? What else have you got? I have a friend, a very close friend on the show. His friend Kyle, his brother Kyle is a director, and he would always be asked that. What else do you have? Because they're looking at, I'm not just going to roll the bones and gamble on this one project. Looks pretty good. I just want to know, does he have a sleeve of projects? How much potential does this guy have, whether it's a writer or a director? They always ask that one same question. And it didn't matter if it was just a moviegoer, a fan. It's funny, everyone wants to know, yeah, what's next? Or they look at a magazine and they're like, okay, what's in the next issue? On the back page. I don't know, it's a human instinct. They're not even done reading the edition in front of them. They're looking, what's next month? So it's a good thing to remember that getting back to elevator pitches, it's like when you're watching on a DVR or TiVo, right? They have to encapsulate, TV Guide has to encapsulate into 2 sentences what's the essence of the film. You probably all have had to do that, right, with your screenplays? So that's critical. Always be mindful of that. I don't think they're really, you're people that are hired to read.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they even get past the title. Hey, that looks good, keep, throw away. There's only so much they can read based on the wages that they pay them. It's kind of sad. You see this in a lot of production companies. There's just people paid for very modest wages. They have English degrees, if you're lucky, and but they have no time to go through everything. So looking for an excuse to toss something. I was working in the mailroom at Universal Studios during my college days.
Local 134.
Huh?
The local 134. That was the union.
What was that, your union? Mine is
Mine was
839. You're 134?
I was at 134, and I was at Universal, and then Amblin Entertainment.
Yeah, I ran stuff to Amblin, but we were in the mailroom, and the proverbial mailroom. And I got to tell you, there were these big wheeled laundry wagons filled with Jiffy packs of scripts and, at the time, VHS tapes. And we were legally not allowed to perforate those in any way. We just had a stamp that was put over it and just returned, because legal department wouldn't allow us to. And everybody's just sending it blindly.
Everyone's dreams.
Yeah, you're kind of curious what is in those packages, but you weren't allowed to. Not at all. It just had to go directly back to the sender. It's sad.
I just saw a documentary on Joan Jett, and she's awesome. And she was in the band The Runaways when she was young. And does anyone know who Joan Jett is? Joan Jett and the Blackhearts.
Yeah.
I love rock and roll.
So when she was done with The Runaways, all the other gals had record deals and all that. She had like a little cassette tape, and she had this one manager who is her manager to this day. It's a great story of like not quitting. And someone like passing up on stuff, how stupid of them. But she had on this little demo tape, I Love Rock and Roll, the remake of Crimson and Clover, like 2 other huge hits.
No.
And they passed them out to all these record companies, and they passed. They don't like it. Don't lose the guitar. Girls really don't play guitar and sing rock and roll. Da-da. So her manager and friend at the time really believed in her. Said, why don't we just make our own record? Just make it and just sell it after shows, and let's just do it. So he got her kids just then starting the college tuition. It was a newborn baby then. And I think it was $7,000, and said, I believe in you, I'm gonna do it. So they got her to a recording studio. She recorded those songs, that record. It was on Blackheart label, that's her label company. She now has bands on this label company. It's a great story. So then, after the show, they sold these records after the show, and then all those songs became #1. I Love Rock and Roll, blah, blah, blah. The girls' college fund that went to, she now runs the company. She's a grown woman. She runs Blackheart Records. And on Blackheart Records are all these other huge bands that record from her record company. But all these other labels like Sony and Island Records and Warner Brothers passed. Wasn't good enough. So it's like I'm saying, just don't quit. You never know. I know, I think Chris Columbus, when he was working with the guy that wrote Home Alone, who had John Hughes, who had other like teeny bopper hits, was trying to get Home Alone done. And there's a few studios that did pass. And I know of one story where the studio that picked it up and made it, there's one executive said, we need a film like that. And then someone said, well, we had that script here. We passed on it. They said, who passed on it? I think that guy doesn't work there anymore. He probably got let go. But who's to say your stuff's not good or not?
The stories are legion. There's a book called, was it Experts Speak? Has anyone heard of that book? It's just a collection of rejections in any field, whether it's sciences, literature, and it's just startling. It's actually breathtaking. The great works that we all revere just rejected. The conventional wisdom, the experts speak. I mean, I didn't say this, but I do remember hearing it. I mean, if you don't believe in yourself, why the hell should I believe in you? It sounds very trite, but maybe in other industries, we're kind of in the carnival business, we're in show business, but, unabashed self-promotion is like looked down on in a lot of society. In entertainment, it's a virtue. I'll never bag on someone for promoting themselves, even if it's shameless. Because it's a war of attrition, and it's like sales. I can tell you just personally, just totally anecdotally on the side, this summer, talking to very big players in Palm Springs about, I said, do you know next May is the 100th anniversary of Liberace's birth? He was a big figure down here. You guys interested in doing something at the Annenberg Theater? I know this person, they know this person, maybe we can produce something. It's amazing. Everyone's like, because you think, well, it seems like a natural idea. But you have to be prepared for that. You're going to probably, you're kind of prepared for rejection.
Mm-hmm.
You expect success. You don't want to get into that flat spin, where the plane is just going in a downward spiral. You don't want to go there. Don't expect to lose, but you have to be prepared to say this is part of the, well, I mean, any of you have been in sales, in any kind of sales? Well, you know that, right? It's just percentages. You just have to hang in there. But anyway,
I think,
you said some questions.
yeah, if you have any questions, I'm going to answer.
Are we interesting people talking about interesting things?
You know? That's I don't know.
The more movies I watch
Yes.
with chases and SWAT teams going through, there's almost a tinge of video game
Oh, yeah.
technology on that stuff. And I'm wondering if you guys notice it, and what do you think about it?
You mean gaming as
A lot of
an
movies,
aesthetic?
starting with the Terminator and some of those films way back.
Mm-hmm.
It looks like they picked up storylines from some of these animated
Oh, yeah.
games.
It's a big part of popular entertainment, as we know.
Because the kids love it.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. I wasn't raised on, and I was we straddled the digital age, the analog age and the digital age. And there are people that are just growing up. And have you read the Atlantic magazine, the article called iGen? It's about the kids from 1996 to 2012, that generation. They're past, people say millennials. It's like, that's so Victorian, it's so quaint. The millennials are already thinking about starting families. We're talking about iGen. These are the total digitally immersed generation. And I'm not from that generation. And I got a wake-up call like 12 years ago at lunch. A friend wanted to check that they were distributing his game that he had written. He didn't produce it, but he wrote it. And so we went to GameStop?
Mm-hmm.
And for every animation title I can think of, there had to have been about a 20 to 25 to 1 ratio of content. It was just startling. It's huge. The gaming production content creation is humongous because of what you're describing, all the home entertainment, what you're alluding to, the kids are
Yeah.
not watching like collective movie experience, they're all individualized. I saw teenagers at a pizza parlor, young kids, like high school kids, and they had this large, like 18-inch pizza, and everyone had their different segment on the same pizza. One kid liked peppers, one kid. Separate but equal. It's a different mentality.
I picked my kid up at a dance a few years ago in high school. Not too long ago. I have one more in high school. That's it. But thought I'm gonna go early. I'm gonna go check out the teen spirit. And went in there a little bit early, and I'm just looking at. There's a DJ and there's kids dancing, but there's just a wall of lit faces from phones. All the kids out. I see tons of them. So I'm just trying to find my kid. I'm just trying to, he's on the dance floor. What is he doing? What's going on? And he was in the bathroom smoking. No, he was on the floor. I see him against the wall, like one of these things and stuff. So I go back in my car. I had enough. And dance got over. He jumped in the car. I said, "How was the dance?" I said, "I saw you on the phone." He goes, "Oh, I was asking the girl next to me if she wanted to dance." She said she's waiting for a slow song. So I asked this other girl, da-da-da-da.
Oh my God.
So they don't go up and
Oh,
do it. They all do it by that.
oh my God.
So,
That's
getting
so
back
good.
to my project, I'm trying to write something where, how can I get them to watch something? There's a whole new people, how they get their information.
I think they're
Different.
cognitively, they're a little wired a little differently based
Yeah.
on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, James, about documentary.
Yeah.
The layout is different than a regular feature film. How do you decide what you're gonna cover, like with Joan Jett? Do
Right.
you talk to her and then figure out the theme, or do you decide, I'm gonna write this about her and then find the people to make that happen? Like which?
Yeah, I think if it's a place or a thing or a person or a body of work, I always look at it as where are they now? Like where is it right now at this point? Like this person, where are they now? And then what is their body of work? And then support it with that story, a beginning, a middle, an end. And I'm sure in that road there was conflict, just like your writing book, you do a documentary the same way. I thought, okay, if everyone out here was to go, I gave everyone a camera and go out and do a documentary on the nest. Where would you go with the nest? Would you do it as when it got built and who was the first original owner, or like why is it today? Why is it a big senior kind of meat market kind of thing? It's kind of infamous in a weird way. So it's like documentaries could be anything. And
Sure.
it's like, so how do you wrestle like the nest or something like that? No, it's not a person, it's a, so.
Like if I were filming a documentary about the nest and my target audience was young kids and gaming, I would have you have permission to film in there.
Right.
I would have a GoPro
Right.
on my head, and then you'd be moving because so much of like what you're alluding to with the car chases is immersive, where it's not proscenium presentation. It's all immersive. It's all you're moving into space and you're seeing these exotic creatures,
Yeah. But I break it down as a beginning, a middle, and end.
Sure.
I do. I just totally try to figure out, where are they born?
Yeah, where are the beats?
How they got out? What are they?
'Cause
And then,
when-
is it interesting? Doing
Sure.
interesting things? Is it going along is it holding?
Even when they're doing pre-production design on feature films, you don't do continuity boards. It's ridiculous. They haven't even finished even figuring out the script. But you do what's something called a beat board, which is essentially mood pieces, which is like a children's board book, where it's just like a sequence of, let's say you could take 6 images, whatever the rendering is, whatever the artist who is doing the inspirational work is, and it's to set the mood, whether it's a Hunchback of Notre Dame, it's a shot on the Seine, on Ile de la Cité in the center of Paris, and it's on let's say it's a stormy night, and maybe there's the leaves blowing, and it's all on this one image, and it just has this mood. And there's no real specific narrative, but it's to immediately establish a kind of an emotional or a subtext, an emotional connection, a visceral connection through, I'm talking about artwork, but it's essentially not even more than a half dozen to a dozen at the most beats in a story. They work the narrative around those moments. And I think I was alluding to that earlier about when working on storyboards, trying to get moments in any presentation that go within the framework of beginning, middle, and end.
Yeah, and I think a documentary can also be an accident. You can go in. I don't know if
yeah.
you saw American Family with the Louds back in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
It's a perfect family in Santa Barbara. The film crew went out there. They shot him. Right then, he dropped a bomb that he's getting a divorce. So the documentary crew's like, "Holy shit, what's going on?"
Yeah, this is
like
a
this ain't a
left
good
turn.
family. They're falling apart, and they're like, "Film it." And it was just the whole family unraveling. The kid came out of the closet. It was like on PBS, and
Yeah.
it was little short 30-minute shows, and you just kept watching the Loud family. And I just saw a documentary.
Yeah.
It was the world's largest home being built in the United States, and the guy sold timeshare, and they were filming this home being built. Well, the market dropped out back in 2007, 8, and everything just fell apart. So the film crew's like, I don't think they're gonna finish the house. And they said, film this though, the whole. So this gal had, I think, 7 Filipino gals, staff for her family. I mean, she had about 8 dogs. She had, but you see them down to like one gal who's helping the family. The husband's just depressed. the wife doesn't know how to even put her own nail polish on. She always had someone do it. So you see just the unraveling. But they were gonna say, you know, like how the guy became successful, built this big home, and wow, it's a castle. And when they went out there to film it, it just fell apart. So they're like, how did this guy become this? Why is it, you know? So it's documentary, I try to structure a beginning, middle, and end, and conflict, but sometimes accidents happen. You
Yeah,
just
and those
gotta
are good
go.
accidents because they resonate with the audience. That's why, like, American Family became such an iconic program within that format, was that, wow, they're screwed up like we are. Because, you think you're getting only the sugar-coated version. There's many stories of filmmakers setting out to do like a feature film. The Hughes brothers wanted to do a film about the whole industry of prostitution and pimps. And so as part of their research, they went and interviewed on video all these old guard, notorious pimps. And as they did all these interviews, the anecdotes were so outrageous. They just looked at their script and they just like put it in the trash can. They go, this is the movie. These guys are just, it's way beyond what we imagined it, because we're coming in from a limited viewpoint. We have a lot of influences from outside that aren't genuine from us. These guys, even if they're not completely on the level, they're entertainers. So they said, well, you know what, we're just gonna make a documentary, American Pimp, about these guys. And that it was very successful in film festivals and online. But yeah, they totally went in with a narrative, dramatic premise. And they were so sure of themselves that they were gonna shoehorn everything into their premise, their manifesto. And they realized in the process became the product. Because it went way beyond their imagination. So yeah, you don't know, there's a lot of accidents.
I have questions. Mine are more about access, which I'm sure you never get that question. But I have a particular script that didn't have the benefit of starting young as a screenwriter. I was an actress. But I didn't have the benefit of going to school for this. 100% self-taught. Over the last 10 years, I'm very proud of myself. I won the Page International Screenplay Contest last week, first place.
Right on.
Which,
Very good.
yay me.
Yeah, cool.
So all of a sudden I am starting to get it. I'm a finalist in 3 other ones, which is
Right on.
cool. Big family film.
Thank you.
Similar to The Karate Kid, but it's a Native American story about a girl.
Cool.
So all of a sudden, yesterday I had 2 calls from producers, and they all are requesting the script. I ran into a financier last week at Pinocchio's drinking mimosas. Turns out she's a huge film financier. We were talking about it because I was
Great.
excited about the contest coming up the next day. So she said, send it to me. So she's apparently talking to people about it too. I don't have a lawyer. I don't have a manager. I don't have an agent. The Page said, use this time right now, use the momentum to start sending out query letters. I sent 15 last week, have had 0 responses. I do not want to take this years and years of work on the script that I think could be a very large film in my dreams, which I believe in, and just some guy from Lexington, Kentucky or somewhere saying, I'm a producer, I want to option this thing for a year and package it and put it together. I just feel like I need some real guidance from somebody who really knows what they're doing to steer me through, navigate the rocky roads so I get the kind of success that I hope I could get. Do you have any and should I pick up the phone?
Well,
Rather than sending query
who were your
letters?
query letters to?
One was to CAA, 2 attorneys. I met an
Oh,
attorney last year.
Attorneys and agencies.
I met an attorney last year in New York. It was part of the Meryl Streep, Oprah Winfrey Writers Lab thing. And I met an attorney, and he said, I'd love to represent you, but I want $5,000 up front. And the minute I heard that, and everybody else heard that, forget it.
Yeah, it's a red flag.
It's a big red flag. So should I try for an attorney first, and maybe that'll help me get the right manager? Should I, I said it to, what I've tried to do is I've gone to IMDb Pro, and I'm targeting which movies are similar to movies that I've
That's
written.
good.
And then I'm looking at who wrote that, who's their manager, who's their agent. Hi, so-and-so, I saw that you were involved with McFarland USA, which was a family sports drama. I just won the Page, here's my other stuff. Would you consider? but I'm not hearing anything back from anybody, and
Yeah.
I don't know, any other ideas?
Well, first impression is, and I think we mentioned it before we got up here, if you're sending 15 letters out, I don't think you send out enough.
So, do you think I should just blanket, just go with it?
What do you mean? Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
you should send to a
tons.
lot more because the percentages are so low to begin with. My brother's roommate, Bob Cashell at Irvine, UC Irvine, huge Seinfeld fan, wrote a spec script for Seinfeld. So he wrote a cover letter and a letter of introduction, who he was, what he likes. I have this script, would you be interested? He sent it out to 120 agents.
Okay.
And of the 120 agents, 6 responded. And of the 6, only 2 said, yeah, send us the script. So he didn't get a response from 114 of them. They just didn't even answer him. But this is about 20 years ago. But then, yeah, you have 6, and of the 6, only a third of those actually said, yeah, send us your script. And of that, one agent was a low-level agent who kind of works as an intake agent, where they take in absolutely new talent, usually younger talent, and they can only represent that writer for so long, and they understand that when this writer is moving on, they need a bigger agency, and they move, and they understand that's the understanding. They're not trying to possess this one nugget of gold. They're just working on volume of talent coming through. But that was just my very first impression, was that if you only send out 15 letters, it's not enough.
No. So
And now if it's digital, you can send it, just add
So just,
infinitum.
do you think it should be an attorney first? I mean, who do you think?
No, it'd be
should
I mean, agencies are invested with attorneys.
Yeah, I think the attorney will come eventually. But-
Yeah.
So don't worry about the attorneys, go
No.
for the agents and managers.
Right, that's like a guy I remember we saw a screening somewhere in a film, and he had a question and answer with some producer guy, and he goes, I have $20 million, I want to do a feature film, what studio should I talk to? And the guy goes, well, you are a studio. Why do you need a studio? Just go.
So why are you asking us to
Yeah,
invest?
I say is go for it, and attorneys will find you, don't worry.
Okay, thanks.
Do you write a letter and send it in the US mail then? Or do you, I mean, have we gone to you just email the agency?
It's pretty much email agencies. What do you think about a letter? It's-
God, you used to be able to send cash from the racetrack in the mail, and it was safe. Now it's not so safe. Because my brother worked, and I got to know Doc Gordon, who's one of Jack Benny's writers. And he's just a retired, wise ass, very funny guy, landlord of apartment buildings in West Hollywood. But yeah, he talked about working at the track and how the US mail used to be very, very secure, and you could send stuff like that. I don't know if it's even efficient to do a letter, because they might have liability insurance from getting paper cut from opening the envelopes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's email.
But email, a lot of
works
people
for-
ignore email though too. They just it goes to a spam filter, and that's not good either.
My brother works for MGM still. He's worked there for years, and he
Yeah.
has two cell phones. One
Yeah.
is doing that, and one's doing this. But I would say email. Yeah, let's say email.
I mean, if you're gonna send, you mean sending just as an inquiry?
The inquiry letter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess, right? But people
I
ignore
think
emails.
They ignore emails. Just remember, there's a 16-year-old kid reading it on the other end.
Unless you have a good log line on your email.
That's true.
Yeah.
Log line, tag line, and that's
Some-
all they read.
I think this is interesting.
Do
so I'll read
both.
it.
They're reading fortune cookies.
I was gonna say something about what she was talking about. Wouldn't it help if she said, I have got this particular star
Yes.
that will be an
Package it.
attachment, package it, and then send it to the people that you're looking for.
That's
You can-
Michael Ovitz, CAA. That was the whole concept, was packaging, semi-producing stuff, getting stuff front-loaded. Even in my specialty of animation, so much of the digital age, which is exciting because you can actually do stuff on your own desktop. In production work, they front-load the production and everyone wears more hats. And it's overwhelming. It's not fun anymore, But that's the idea of marketing property, intellectual property, is that, what you're alluding to, packaging with talent. My friend's wife is best friends with these people, and yeah, they want to take a look because all these actors are looking away to shelter money. I mean, I'm talking about big, like established actors who have money. They want to shelter their money in productions, in developing productions that they can write off, because most productions are a write-off. Any producer, like on Broadway, has a hit, they're looking for a bomb they can write off against the win so they don't owe anything, you know. So that's an accounting thing.